So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 75, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Katrina Benjamin, who's a chief product officer at Apartment List. So Apartment List is a leading home rental marketplace that has over 5 million homes listed on its platform. So part of Apartment List, Katrina led product to Upwork, so she has some really incredible product and marketplace experience. So this is a really great group chat that we just had with Katrina, where we got to learn more about her experience at Upwork. Now at Apartment List, got to learn about some unique product insights and also had a great Q&A for those on the chat. So I really enjoyed it, and I know you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Katrina, welcome to the group chat, and it's definitely great to have you join us here today. So you have some really incredible experience at both Upwork and Apartment List, which are two marketplaces most of us have probably heard of. So I'm really excited to learn more about it today. Before jumping into things, though, I think it'd be great if you could start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I'm Katrina Benjamin. I'm from Minnesota, the great state, over 15,000 lakes. And I majored in econ in college, which is, I think, how I didn't know about marketplaces at the time, but it sort of gave me a lot of that foundational understanding to think about how things interact and what equilibriums look like and how you balance kind of supply and demand. So really interesting. Didn't think it would be useful like in my job at the time, but after college I worked at a small startup called Opportune, which offers loans to underbanked Latin American immigrants. And so I was responsible for operations for our stores, so physically operating them as well as opening them, as well as like figuring out the financials for the stores. And so the thing that stuck with me and kind of led me to marketplaces and product is the intersection of that customer feedback, that qualitative feedback, as well as the data. So I was in the stores all day with our customers, and then also was looking at the data and how to make it match. And I was in the unique position to put those things together. And I think that's sort of what has defined my career and the things that I've looked for in every other role. So worked at Opportune for 3 years. Then I went to business school at Stanford, and then joined Upwork just after that. Spent 8 years at Upwork, marketing operations at the beginning, and then product. And then just 3 months at Apartment List, and I'm the chief product officer at Apartment List today. I oversee design, user research, product analytics, and product management.
That's awesome. That's a great background and a pretty cool journey into the world of marketplaces. So, kind of going back to Upwork, since most of us have probably heard of it as a marketplace, of course, and it has definitely inspired many of us to start our own. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you were working on there, and maybe some of the challenges of it as a marketplace.
Yeah, and I had multiple tours of duty, if you want to call them that, at Upwork. So I can and I think each of them sort of taught me a key lesson. So when I first started, I was on the operations team, and my job was marketplace talent strategy. And so we had really, like many marketplaces do, underinvested in the talent side. We had really invested a lot in the client side. The client is where a lot of the revenue comes in. And we were sort of in a position where they opened up a role to say, how should we think about our strategy on the talent side? How should we acquire? How much should we spend for that? How should we retain and grow talent? And how do we kind of measure our success in all of those ways? And so I think it was a really interesting problem, really challenging problem, one that actually I continued to come back to throughout my 8 years there. I think the most interesting piece and the biggest takeaway for me was how different things look in different kind of sub-marketplaces. So in particular at Upwork, we have different categories of work. So design, for example, being an example, web development, writing, customer service. Customer service is sort of the opposite of logo design. So customer service, you get one job maybe every 6 months or 12 months, and you make actually not that much per hour, but a lot overall because you work so many hours a week. On logo design, you might be taking on 50 jobs in 1 month, or 50 is a lot, probably more like between 10 and 20 jobs in 1 month. And so it's very different. The customer experience is really different. How the clients interact with you is different. How the talent interact is different. And so that lens was part of my first job at Upwork. My second big job was around product acquisition, product in particular, and then I expanded to own all of acquisition, marketing, and product. So it was paid performance, it was SEO, organic as well as the experience, the landing pages and everything else. And I think the biggest lesson for me in that role was the how much you can do when you work together across these different functions. I really had an appreciation and continue to bring with me that appreciation for if there's a problem for the business, we should solve it together with all of the different groups involved, operations, marketing, finance, product, data science, all of the things that we have at our disposal in order to really solve the problem. So that was spent several years kind of working on acquisition, top of the funnel. And then my last kind of tour of duty at Upwork was around search and market design and pricing. And so that one, extremely interesting. Many search engines within Upwork. There's kind of the job search engine, there's the talent search engine, there's also other recommendations and ranking places for both. And so the most interesting thing I thought was just the power of incentives and how whenever you do something, there's always not just a first order effect, but a second order effect just because of how people interact with each other. But the power of incentives to really solve problems in marketplace design to make sure that we are creating the best possible scenario for all parties involved, that was a huge takeaway for me in that role.
Yeah, there's so much we could jump into with that. I did actually want to go back to, you mentioned the point as far as, managing the categories, right? And like a lot of us here say that run horizontal marketplaces, that it's almost like running multiple marketplaces within one, right? Across the categories. So since there's so many at Upwork, how did you think about managing the categories? And then, maybe what's, one kind of like example of how nuanced, that they might be?
Mm-hmm. So I think the most important thing, I think org structures, goals, like all of those things can change, but the most important thing is understanding them. And so what you don't want to do is just assume, just always run the average metric and then decide, well, this is obviously applies to everywhere. And so just understanding, like we built out the dashboards of the different metrics and what they look like for these different categories. When we would run A/B tests, we would often run cuts for different categories. Sometimes we would run tests just in a category versus others. And so I think that is the number one thing. I think if you do understand them, then you do have the ability to track and to look at these different sub marketplaces, if you will, differently, that unlocks every other decision that you make. And so I think that's kind of the number one thing to focus on. One example of where we saw difference there, I think the biggest, if you think about, let me actually talk about a different set of sub marketplaces. So there's sort of short-term jobs versus long-term jobs. And so within graphic design, for example, there are many things that you could think of that would be maybe like an hour or less. And there are many things that you could think of that would be 6 months to 12 months. And so those are in their own ways sub marketplaces. And it's almost like sub marketplaces, depending how you do it. But there are really a lot of similarities, more similarities, I would say, across like a long-term graphic design job and a long-term customer service job than there are between a 1 hour customer, design job and a 6 month design job. And so that is sort of just another angle. We definitely have, I think the biggest difference was just in terms of the client hiring behavior and what they were looking for. It's really, if you're going to spend less than $100 on something, it's pretty low risk, pretty easy to make a decision. If you're going to hire someone and integrate with them with your team, you just care so much more about that experience. And so the product experience, for example, if you post a job and you see the recommendations and we kind of take you through the flow, was more optimized for the single kind of short-term job world where you sort of like, let's chat with a few people and decide based on not very much information who I'm going to hire, and then like get to have them do the job in 24 hours and come back to me. And so a lot of the work that we did was understanding those personas and needs a little bit differently, and then giving a lot more guidance to the longer term job clients as they were hiring to make sure that they are treating it just like an employee, right? Like interview a couple people, give them a test project. Those types of things were some things that we saw our best clients say, the clients who had really figured it out. And so sharing that information with more people was really important to sort of enable that wider range of activity within the platform.
Yeah, that's really great. So did you work on both as far as the short term and the long term, or could you maybe share a little bit more about kind of like how the org structure and the team? team is it?
Yeah. And so, I mean, over the years, a lot of different org structures. We never segmented our product teams by category, and we never segmented our product teams by sort of sub-segment of job within the marketplace. What you have seen in the more recent years is sort of building out more specific product lines. So if you go to the Upwork website homepage today, you can see that there's Project Catalog, which is really designed for that shorter term, very well scoped type of job. And then you can see Talent Scout, which is for those kind of long-term placements. And so there are, at this point, kind of almost sub-brands and sub-product optimizations that are happening at that level within the talent marketplace, which still continues to be almost the catch-all. Like clients can post any job that they want. And we see a lot of clients, go to Catalog and say, I just want to define exactly the things that I need and write my bullet points and figure out who's available. And so the talent marketplace will always have that really wide range, and we have not segmented the ownership by that. Again, it really comes down to understanding the numbers, cutting tests by different numbers and understanding how each of them shifted, doing customer research across the different types of personas and the different types of needs, and then making sure that we are making the right trade-offs in order to enable everybody to be successful and kind of creating the right product experiences that lead to those decisions that allow us to provide that really strong guidance.
Yeah, I'm sure that was quite the customer research with so many different needs and categories. And
Yeah.
so yeah. So now jumping into Apartment List, which I'm really excited to chat about. Could you maybe share more about what led you to joining the team?
Yeah. So joined Apartment List about 3 months ago, and I think there are a couple of things that were really exciting. I mean, the first thing is the people, and that's always important in whatever job, that there are people that you love, people that you can learn from, and so that was really, really strong opportunity. I think the second one is just the mission of the company. Apartment List enables renters to find homes. 75% of renters say that that's extremely stressful. I think we've all been there, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like in our age of technology, it really doesn't have to be that way. That's on the renter side. On the leasing agent side, think of a 200 unit building. There's 3 leasing agents who work 24/7, all of the contractor requests, every lead that comes in, every tour. And then we send them questions like, do you allow dogs? When like on the website, it says that you allow dogs. Like technology, we're in the age that we can apply technology to solve these people problems much, much better. And so that opportunity to really help people with one of their most important decisions, with where they spend kind of their biggest household expenditure. 100 million Americans at certain points are renting their homes. And so really an important mission space. I think the third thing is just like the project foundation and the opportunity ahead. I really love how differentiated Apartment List is in terms of the product offering for both renters and properties. And there's so much opportunity to kind of leverage that into both expanding our core business as well as adjacent business models that serve adjacent customers or serve our existing customers more deeply. And so those are really the things that got me excited.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely want to jump into some of the unique or differentiating factors. Before we do though, could you maybe like walk us through like that product experience and what it's like for both sides?
The product experience on Apartment List?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the renter side, apartment renters who are looking for a home will typically start by just answering a few questions about them. So how many bedrooms are you looking for? What amenities are important to you? And most importantly, what is most important to you? And the options are staying within my budget, staying in the location that I want, getting all of the amenities. And so that really tells us a lot about the renter. Then where we land them, and this is where we get kind of a ton of praise from our renters, is on actually not a search page, but a categories experience. And so we'll say, this matches everything you want. Maybe there's only 3 that have everything you want. If you were to commute a little bit farther, but you want all your amenities, here's where you go. Or if you wanted to pay a little bit more, maybe this is where you could get. And so we really help renters make those trade-offs and around what's important to them in order to help them find a home that they love, which is our goal. So that is the renter experience. Typically, then they will go click a category. Maybe they want to start with the things that match everything. They will decide whether they like, love, or don't like each of those properties. And then we'll encourage them to reach out to the properties that they are interested in. And at that point, the leasing agent we'll contact them. The way that Apartment List makes money is based on leases that are signed. And so what properties love is that we make money only when they make money, rather than just every month or based on a phone number or based on something else. And so on the property side, their experience is actually primarily with our sales people, not with our product. We push our information into the systems that they already use. So we'll push, if a renter contacts them, it will show up as a tour booking. It will show up as an email. It will show up as in their system with information that we have already collected about the renter, and then they can follow up. And so they sort of go through that third-party system, and then they talk to our sales agents and our customer success agents around their needs, around how we're serving them and how we could kind of adjust to serve them better. So that's kind of, I think, the best summary of how both sides of the marketplace interact.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm really interested to learn more about the kind of renter preferences and matching versus kind of using like an open style listings. So was that something that Apartment List did since the beginning, or?
I don't know about like day one, but it's definitely been a hallmark of our product for many, many years. And it is something that renters really like and differentiates us from others. The downside is that it is kind of it's a narrow funnel. And so kind of pushing people down a funnel doesn't work for everyone. It gives us really the ability to give you matches that are just so much more effective, and also to give the properties information right off the bat without you having to fill out anything else that allows them to follow up with you. But the downside is that it doesn't fit everybody's needs. And so that's definitely something that we're continuing to explore, is how can we offer, what is the, one or two things that we need to know about you to really help you push you into the right experience? What kind of optionality can we offer you in terms of whether it be search by map or search by name or something else? And then how do we also just guide you and give you that information? Like, one of the things that's true about renting, it's very stressful, as I said, but we do it every day. You don't, right? Like, every individual only rents maybe every 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. We do it every day. And so we should be able to tell you, okay, one of the important questions, for example, is like, when is your move-in date? And some people are like, I have no idea. I may or may not move. Like, I'm just exploring. And some people are like, I have to move by November 8th. I have no choice. Like, I will take anything. And that's a really important distinction. And so if we can sort of tell you, okay, you have to move, listen, you're going to need to set up tours with 3 properties now. Here's the virtual tour options. Here's the phone call options. And here you go. For the people who are just looking, okay, here's what I suggest. Why don't you create a few different searches? Why don't you narrow down your list to a few different sets of groups? And then why don't you have these conversations? And so that kind of guidance, no one in the industry is doing, and we are really kind of in the position to do that. But we want to bring more people into the fold in terms of like getting the right information from the right people, and not the things that don't matter to you. And then so that's a kind of a continual opportunity for us in the future.
Yeah. And then so how are you kind of managing that matching and I would say like liquidity across so many markets and with so many listings on your platform?
Yeah, and it's challenging. And I think search problems in general are really interesting because there's the marketplace dynamics component. And so on the search side, we need to balance the renter needs with the property needs, with also the business needs. So renters all like the places with beautiful big windows and all of the amenities, but that may not be in their budget. It may not be in their location. And so we kind of need to manage that. For on the property side, they really want to talk to the renters who need to move November 8th. And have to move by then. That's where they get the kind of highest ROI from their own time spent, because those leasing agents do get paid based on the leases that are signed. And if we send them all these people who are in Seattle and may move to Austin and may move to New York, like, they are not going to be excited about following up with those renters, and they're also not going to get paid, and it won't align with kind of the leasing agent incentives. And then same on the property side. Or on the business side, we make different amounts for different properties. And so how do we balance all of those together? There are a bunch of mechanisms that we use, kind of from the actual matching to, what we historical data that we use to set targets for how many renters a different property needs, things that actually like we push manually into the ranking algorithm. So there's a number of things that we do. I think that ultimately, like, think of the Pareto efficiency curve. We're trying to like maximize success for everybody. That's sort of where we're trying to get. And every time we make a change, we need to measure the whole slew of impact and then kind of trade off against each other when those things are not universally moving in the same direction at the same magnitude.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a data-rich marketplace. So on the note of that, what's like your North Star metric or some other kind of KPIs that you're optimizing for?
Yeah. So I think the way that we win as a business is when customers love us. And so on the renter side and on the property side, we look at their satisfaction rate. It's kind of a 1 to 5 rating. And on the property side, we ask for a few different dimensions. On the renter side, we typically ask for one primary dimension. So that's a really important guiding metric, something that ultimately, like, foundationally for the business, as we grow into many years in the future, we need to make sure that that is really excellent. In terms of the more kind of monetization or business metrics, there's kind of 2 big metrics. So on the renter side, if you come to our site, it's because you need something, you're looking for a place to rent. And so we want to measure whether we are helping you with that, and by what we call registration to lease. So are you actually finding an apartment that you want to live in and signing a lease with them? And so that's a really important North Star metric on the renter side. On the property side, the thing that they care most about is, once I get someone in the system, or am I able to convert that to a lease? And so that's what we call contact to lease. And it's sort of similarly a measure of how successful we're helping our leasing agents be in their goal, which is filling their open units in their building.
I'm sure this is going to prompt quite a few questions when we get in the Q&A here in a little bit. I actually didn't ask, but for some context, how many markets do you operate in?
We're all across the US, not anywhere internationally. And so, I mean, there are 50 states that we're in. The cities have their own kind of sub-markets. We're in the hundreds level, depending on how you slice it. But we really have coverage across the US. There's definitely places where we have more supply versus others. But generally, all of the 100 top cities in the US, we have strong demand and supply.
Got it. Yeah. Now, jumping into your role more specifically, as a chief product officer at Apartment List, what are you primarily focused on, and like what is like a day-to-day like for you?
Yeah. So really, I think my job is 3 things. It's the product, the people, and the processes. And product, that's something that our customers love, that enables our business to grow, that has a large addressable market, and that we're able to capture a lot of that. So like, I think there's a lot of things that go into that, but generally that's a big part of my job. The second one is around the processes. And this is really like how we come together as a team, how we work together, how we execute, how we set goals, and how we hold ourselves accountable to that. And it's really an enabler for the people, and it's an enabler for the processes. And so, for the product. So that processes piece is the second piece. The last one is around the people, and not last because it's the least important. In fact, I think it's the most important, but making sure that we are bringing in the right people into the team, that we are helping our people grow, that we are building a high functioning team that with all of the right skills, all of the right kind of partnerships. So, and I would put also culture is sort of in some ways touches on all of them, but I think people and processes and people in particular are kind of the heaviest on the culture side. So those are the 3 things that I work on every day. I think probably 1 day a week, I try to devote to bringing in new people, or even not just the people that we need now, but people that we might want to hire a year or 2 years from now. And so talking to people on LinkedIn, interviewing, working through the open roles that we have and how we're doing on that. That's probably a day a week. Another day a week is probably spent on maybe 2 days on that cross-functional alignment. I think one of the most important parts of my job is to get that alignment up front, so that my team doesn't have to argue with 7 people when they're trying to do something, and we don't have 14 people going in different directions. And so alignment with other teams, I think that's a really important part of my job. And then I think the last 2 are kind of on those people and processes and product in the way of like the actual execution. So what kind of design reviews are we doing? What test results are we having? What are we planning for next quarter? What is user research coming back? What does the data tell us? There's it all kind of leads into the product, but it's sort of the people and the processes that help us accomplish the results that we want for our customers and for our business.
Yeah, and on that note, how big is the team, and what is like the org structure like? It sounds pretty cross-functional from what you're mentioning.
Yeah, so we have within my team we have 30 people, so about 10 product analysts, about 10 design and user research, about 10 PMs. It's not exactly that, but around there. Our close partner team is engineering. They have around 50 people today, and so our cross-functional squads tend to involve product analytics, partnership, engineering, design, and product. And so we have all of those teams. There are a couple teams that are pretty self-sufficient within being able to do a lot with just those teams. But I would say the majority of teams have that cross-functional work. So whether it be the growth team, whether it be performance marketing, whether it be data science, I mean, there's all sorts of different teams that we work with. Sales, which we call GTM, go to market, is a big part of our organization. And almost everything that we do that involves properties, we involve that team as well. And so we are organized around kind of big company objectives, and there are one executive sponsor for each of them. And there are kind of a number of sub teams depending on how big the objective is. There's kind of some sub teams below that are really cross-functional. They're setting their roadmaps together, they're setting their goals together, they're reporting out on the progress together. And so we, from an org perspective, in terms of who's expense reports and who's, performance reviews, it's really product analytics and design. But when we actually execute and kind of create our roadmap and execute on our roadmap, it is that cross-functional group that is leveraged in different ways for different things in order to allow us to accomplish our goals.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that big objectives, sponsor from executives. So is that like on a quarterly basis or?
On an annual basis. So we have a 5-year vision and we have kind of 5 pillars that roll up. And so we just went through this process for 2022 where we say, okay, in 5 years, going into 2027, we want to be at this place. What do we have to do uniquely in 2022 in order to get there? And so we went through that exercise and we came up with 4 strategic objectives, and there's 4 foundational objectives that we have. And then we sort of allocated who are the leaders from all of the departments for each of those, and then how do we kind of scope out what 2022 looks like for those. And so those objectives will persist even across years. And there's things like, for example, develop a really vibrant and diverse virtual first culture that attracts talent and retains talent. That's always going to be important. That's always going to be something that we focus on. And so there are things, and it's also a pillar of ours. And so, these objectives and pillars I think can live across, but there are things that are sort of specific to a particular year. So in particular, new products that we're building, or and that we really want to invest in a certain year, or a strategy that we're using that's just relevant to that year, or there may be an issue that we really need to invest in and solve. And then we sort of are in a good place and don't have to devote as much resources to the future. And so they won't change on a quarterly level. They'll just definitely persist throughout 2022. Some of them will persist on, and we sort of do that evaluation on an annual level.
Got it. Yeah, I'm over here thinking quarterly, and we're talking years out, right? So, yeah. So
and they're pretty broad, right? Like the objective is not, for example, what would be a small thing like allow search by map. That is not an objective. It's more like how to deliver value to renters at every touch point is one of the things we're working on in 2022. And so we're sort of thinking about what are all the touch points and how do we make sure that we're making them accomplish the renter goals and not just our goals for them. And so that when you frame it like that, you can see how it persists for a long time, but it may take a different flavor in 2022 and 2023. We might talk about, helping people find the best location in the future or something else, right? That's kind of more specific to the year.
Yeah. So on the note of, I guess, like changing and evolving, how has it been, running a remote team during COVID? And are there any kind of, are there any specific challenges with that you've seen?
Yeah, so I have actually been remote since 2016. I lived in the Bay Area for many years and then moved to Denver when we had our first son 5 years ago. And so I was at Upwork remote when a lot of the employees were not remote, although Upwork had always had a very large cohort. More so even than the number of employees, there's probably 3 times as many contractors as there are employees who work with us every day and are core to our team at Upwork. So we kind of always had a little bit of that the sense that you're not the only person on the screen, that there's, we're working across time zones, we're working across the world. I think COVID has created additional challenges because of all of the stuff outside of work that is going on for all of us, and as well as just the speed at which we were all forced to transition from one day to the next. And so I think there's a bunch of things that we've adapted. Like I definitely, when you don't see people as much in the office, going to touching base 2 times a week, whether it's 2 half-hour one-on-ones or a staff meeting and then a one-on-one later, is important, just to get those touch points. How we use Slack at our company, we use Slack, and it's really important to sort of check in personally on people, as well as share information really proactively on Slack. So like, for example, we have an exec meeting every week. I write up the notes and I share it with my staff every week, because it's so much more important that you invest in giving people the context they need to do their job. And so those types of things, whenever there's something like that, I always kind of push that information out right away. And then I also think there are how we kind of manage our calendars and how we schedule breaks for ourselves and like schedule our lives around it. And so making everyone on my team, like, when do you start and when do you end? When do you not want to have meetings? Like, you need to put that on your calendar. No one is going to know. We have people on the East Coast and West Coast. And one of the things that I love that Apartment List does is we have collaboration hours. And so from 12 to 5 p.m. East Coast and from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific, those are the hours where all the big meetings happen. And you don't schedule big meetings outside of those times, because it is just, we don't want to create that expectation of having to wake up really, really early on the Pacific time for everybody, or having to work really, really late East Coast time for everyone. And so I think those are important. So it's like, generally, like, each person and what schedule they work. There are people who love to work early. There are people who love to work late, and like you need to put that on your calendar. And then how we create those breaks throughout the day, how we create like engagement with each other in a social context. And so, happy hours and whatever it might be, and we send snacks to your house or lunch or whatever. And then I think there's like corporate things that are kind of bigger than the whole team that we need to embrace. And I think those collaboration hours are probably one of the best things that we've done to really make sure that we are enabling people to have the lives that they need to live with, regardless of what that looks like, and not out of control, of the things that are happening to them. I think that's one of the most important things about being able to do great work, but also manage yourself, is if someone's always imposing their schedule on you, that's much, much harder than if you get to control your own schedule and how you accomplish the work that you've set out to do. And so I think the collaboration hours really help with that.
Yeah, that's going to be really helpful for us here that are running remote teams. So, well, I feel like you and I could go on chatting for quite some time, but I did have one question before we get into the group questions, which is, how has your product philosophy kind of changed over the years?
That's a good question. I think I care a lot more about customer satisfaction now than I did at the beginning, and just ultimately, like, even to the point of making trade-offs. We know that customers love this feature. We're giving so much positive feedback, or they just view the experience as so much better. The qualitative feedback is so much better. We do, we have different ways, whether it be full story or Hotjar, or even, building surveys in-house that determines, does this work better for you? Are you able to accomplish your goals more? And so I am much more willing now to make trade-offs in favor of that customer experience, because that, in the long term, that is the right thing, even at the expense of kind of a short-term business metric within reason. And so I think that is a big change for me in terms of my product philosophy. And then I guess the other big thing is just that collaboration. So I think it's easy as PMs, especially as a young PM, to be like, I'm control all the priorities and the resources, and I, have the best ideas, and I'm going to work on that. And the reality is, that's not true. Like, your job is actually to listen to people better than other people listen. Like, being the best listener is sort of the PM's job. And so how do we bring everybody's opinions to bear, and how do we come up with that best product that is outside of what you would have kind of come up with yourself? I think that is really, really important. And I think is definitely different than my first year as a PM.
Yeah, that's really great. So we're going to jump into questions here because we have a few. Hey, Maxine, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for all those answers. They're very helpful. Hi. Few questions. How did Apartment List approach you and convince you to come over from Upwork? Did they reach out or did you look or both?
So they reached out, and it was through dropping someone that I knew. And so I definitely, in my first conversation with John, the CEO, told him, I'm not ready to leave. And I'm not sure, but was just so impressed by the team and the mission and the opportunity and how I'd be able to help and how my experience is just exactly what the team needed. So it was being approached through a mutual connection that led to that change.
And how long did it take you to kind of just like move over and leave the job at Upwork?
So it's about a month process in terms of just talking to everybody at Apartment List, meeting people, understanding the business, that kind of thing. And then after that, I did about a month at Upwork, just wrapping things up and saying goodbye to everybody after 8 years. It's
crazy.
pretty bittersweet.
And what just like based on that, what are the biggest differences now that you've worked for these two big companies as a PM? What would you say, like, is it culture is the biggest difference or just like the product itself, or is your role pretty similar?
That's a good question. I mean, ultimately, like, people are people everywhere, and people are not only are people on the team, but the people who use the marketplace are all fundamentally kind of have the same kind of desires and needs and drivers. And so I think there's a lot that's the same. I think processes also are different at different sizes of companies, but I was at Upwork from when it was Odesk and when there was just like 100 and maybe 20 people to now being a public company and being quite large. So we're at a different stage in terms of the processes, which is good. Like you want to have the minimum level of process that's required to make sure that you have alignment and you have visibility and the ability to execute. And so I think taking a step back from where we were at Upwork, we're at a little bit more of a smaller company stage in terms of processes. I think like a lot of the recruiting feels the same, just in terms of people caring about the same things and wanting to enable the same things. The culture, I think both cultures I really love and really are similar in terms of just really caring personally for individuals and exemplifying that through even having not just, business goals, but actually goals around how we support our team members and how we help them be successful. So I think it's more, in some ways it's more similar than not. I think the data and like the metrics and how long they take to mature and what's involved in that is just a little bit different. Like Upwork, for example, everything happens on the platform. We can see that conversations are happening. We can see that within a day, sometimes you can make a hire. For apartment rentals, it's very rare that within a day you would choose the apartment that you live in. And we also don't have as much visibility into all of the conversations that are happening. And so I think that just changes the data collection that we do, the goals that we set, even how we measure tests and how we collect customer feedback. It looks a little bit different in the different marketplaces just because of the use cases. One other big actually difference is Upwork is a daily active user product at least on the talent side, where they will log in every day and do their work and look for jobs and other things. On the client side, it's sort of weekly active. For Apartment List, it's for the properties, they do use it daily, but on the there's a longer time between leases for the renter side. And so that does change the dynamics a little bit just in terms of retention. How can you tell whether you're retaining people or not? It just takes a little bit longer. And so you have to look at it in a different ways.
Good answer. What resources do you use to kind of keep your knowledge updated as like with the role that you're in? Where do you get educated or where does the team educate you?
Yeah. So I think we all learn from everybody. Every interview that I do where I'm interviewing someone, I always try to learn from them. Every peer, every person on your team, every boss that you have. And so I think that's a huge source of learning. And I'm very, very intentional about like, what is your experience with, planning in the past and how do you hold people accountable? What's the best thing that you've seen? What have you seen not work? And so like, that's something as we establish our processes for 2022, which is also my first kind of full year where we're setting out these objectives. I'm asking everybody that question. I also read a ton of books. I love reading business books. And I think that really illustrates a lot for me. I love two of my favorites, and you have to read both. You can't just read one. So one is Working Backwards by Amazon. So it's like super heavy process, big company, but they do a lot of really, really, really interesting things. The other one is No Rules by Reed Hastings from Netflix. So it's like no process. And so you kind of have to read both, because if you read the Amazon book, you're like, I should have so much process. And then if you read the Netflix book, you're like, I should have no process. And the reality is somewhere in between. And so I love all sorts of business books of all kinds. And I do think that I always take away one thing that kind of expands my thinking, or even how I manage my own day, that helps me be successful. So books are big. I do listen to a fair number of YouTube videos. I'm subscribed to different, a couple different product channels, different marketplace channels. And then I also have a circle with other chief product officers that we meet about once a month. And I have a few mentors that I kind of meet with, usually about monthly. So a fair number of things. But I think learning through your day-to-day job is how you learn the fastest and how you learn the most. And so being intentional about that, I think, is my best. My best advice is whatever you're working on, like, you don't get extra bonus points for knowing the answer yourself. You just give all of the points for like getting to a good solution and a good process. And so being really transparent about, like, I don't know how to solve this problem, or I am thinking about different solutions for this. Tell me what you think of this, and tell me what things you've seen in other places that have worked really well, or here that have worked really well, or haven't worked well, so that we can maximize our success.
Good answer.
Those are great. Hey, actually, Maxine, do you mind? Iman has to jump in. He wanted to come on, if that's okay.
Yeah,
we'll come back. So,
of course.
Hey, thank you so much, Maxine. I appreciate that. I've got my wife and daughter waiting for me. I'm in the UK at the moment, so I appreciate that bumping. Thanks, Mike. Katrina, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you a question also about your experience with Upwork, just because I'm in the online talent and online contracting space. Given your the amount of time you've spent immersed in that space, what is your view about the future of online talent? Do you see things heading towards like global players taking over the world? Do you see more niches that, if you could compare a kind of a Shopify client niche to the Amazons of the world, like, where do you see the market heading in that respect?
Yeah. It's really hard to predict the future. I think there's always room for individual vertical players, because there are customer segments, like whether it be, design agencies who always hire a bunch of designers. If you can do such a better job, I think, with that verticalized experience when you are only focused on that and nothing else. That many of our clients at Upwork were using all sorts of different vertical players for different things, and using Upwork for, certain types of things as well. And so I think that vertical players will always be around. I think that there are, like LinkedIn, just launched their talent marketplace, and they've kind of dabbled in it over the years. They do have some enormous advantages in terms of just having so much talent available, so many profiles being filled out, so many connections, and so much ability to use that social data. But there's so many other things that they sort of need to figure out,
right?
That I just don't see. I don't see full consolidation. I think that there's different types of work that will always be more useful for different that other different platforms will always do better. Like Fiverr and Upwork is an example. Fiverr is the freelancer, the talent really scopes it out, and it's usually relatively cheap, and often it becomes those longer term jobs. But I do think there's always room for those players. I really am a big Upwork believer, and I think one of the things that is cool about Upwork strategy right now, which again, you can go to their homepage and kind of see the different product lines that they're launching, is when you have that core asset, which is this amazing network of talent and all of the kind of ratings, and you kind of understand what people can do and what they do well and don't do well, and you have all that data, applying that in more use cases so that your clients have more ability to get everything they are done here, and more differentiate. Like, I need someone super strategic because I don't know the answer, versus like I need someone to execute. Those are actually really different. It's hard to know that on a job post. And I think the more that we can, the platforms that are really good at sort of tailoring to the customer needs on both sides are going to be are going to be even stronger. And so vertical players, I think, probably won't ever be as big, and they're always going to be competing against the big giants. But I think like a LinkedIn coming in and being able to do everything that the other players do is just very unlikely. There's a subset of the market that I think they'll do well, like pretty high-end talent, I would say. But I think there's a lot of other places where they just won't value and won't do as well. And that's actually why I love like very competitive industries, is because you sort of realize like they're investing in that. Like there must be something there. We didn't think that was valuable, but apparently it is, because we see their financials, or we see that they're really building out that product more. And so I see Fraction, a lot of kind of different players with different things that they do well, and continuing to kind of challenge each other and grow.
Great, thank you. Mike, do I have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Fantastic, thank you. So a follow-up question to that is, I mean, looking at like Upwork's latest like investor presentation, like the pitch is there's going to be 600 million or so new remote workers in the next few years. It's a $4 trillion market. Upwork is a tiny fraction of that massive market. So it's just a huge blue sky opportunity out there. But what I'm interested in is, which area of the market do you think is really missing at the moment? What I mean here is it small businesses? Is it like enterprise clients? What's the focus? What's Upwork's focus for the future? And what do you think there is a gap? Where's the missing opportunity in that space?
Yeah, and just in terms of Upwork, I'm not going to comment on Upwork in particular, and haven't worked there for a while now. But I think there's kind of a couple of different segments that I would say. So like traditional staffing agencies, and really COVID was a big slap in the face in terms of like that on-site model. And I think like for years in the industry, we're always hearing like, well, I'm kind of used to having someone near me, and we all felt like that. I think many of us did. Like, I'm used to having someone next to me, and I know how that looks. With COVID, that sort of went out the window. And so I think there's like this traditional staffing providers, and they really do a certain type of work. And typically the people who work for staffing agencies are unemployed, but want to be employed full time, but sort of end up being kind of repeated contractors. Upwork has said this, and many other places, including LinkedIn, kind of enable that lifestyle freelancing and the choosing to freelance and choosing to be a contractor because of what it affords you. And so I think that's a really big distinction in terms of being able to serve a different market. If you were to quit your job and want to freelance, you wouldn't go to Manpower Staffing and be like, hey, can you find me a job? Like, you would use your network, you would use online platforms. And so I think from the talent side, the lifestyle of freelancing by choice, I think, is a really important segment that really hadn't been met for many years, but until these big internet players came to be. And I think that continues to be underserved, and there's a lot more opportunity on that side to really attract more talent and serve them really, really well and help them live the life they want to live. So on the talent side, I think that's important. On the business side, I think like the people who I felt like always have gotten Upwork and No Desk is sort of like the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week people. Like, I want to be on the beach in the Philippines, like hire an accountant and hire a customer service agent. And so I think that has always been the people who get it right away. I think like within every other segment, there are different challenges. I mean, I talked to a franchise owner he was like, I like do everything and I just need so much help. Like, I don't even know where to start, and I don't trust people, and I just, it's really hard to make the leap. And then there's people who, Microsoft, like they hire a bunch of agencies to do all sorts of ad campaigns for them. Should they do that through Upwork or through somewhere else, or should they do that on their own? Like, there's a place to displace. There's sort of like, I guess, displacing existing hiring. So I used to do staffing agencies. Now I do Upwork. Or I used to do source agencies through a third party, and now I go directly to agencies. So there's that displacement. Then there's like really going into completely new needs. Like, I didn't even know that I could hire a PM that did, on Upwork versus hiring it somewhere else. Or I didn't even know that I could hire an accountant. And so there's sort of like new I guess the category would be, there's like things that you already do that you would do anyway, that you're just outsourcing. There's also things that maybe you wouldn't have time to do that you could bring someone on for. And I think it's less about like the small business or the large business or the tiny business or whatever. It's more about like how you think about your time. What are the things in your time that you could give away? What are the things that you could really outsource to someone else and you could do it just as well as you or better than you? How do you bring in consultants for different things? I think that's the key question. And I think all of those have big opportunities to attack on the client side. The ones that are harder is obviously like not displacement of current spend, but it's sort of the new spend on freelancing or contracting that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey, Matt, do you want to jump on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Matt.
Okay, cool. Hi, Katrina. Thanks so much for all the useful information. So my name is Matt. I actually come from Paris, and I'm one of the co-founder of Colette, which is a marketplace to help senior people to rent their empty rooms to students. Okay.
Nice.
So I'm particularly interested in what you're doing now. And one question, potentially to deep dive on what Mike asked as a first question is, now considering your North Star of satisfaction, has the company ever considered showing the supply instead of doing more of a service approach? Because this is actually what we do now. So you have to first become a member of the club. You don't see the supply. Okay, you don't see the host in the rooms. And we're super early, so we're a very small startup. But we are already considering flipping this the other way around, and as the others, actually showing the supply to everyone, but only the ones that are like keen or want to bid on something would then go on the process of filling in all the forms and information. You know, what's your take on this, and what has been the approach at Apartment List?
And generally, I just think with the leading technology apps, more information is always better. And so I definitely are on the side of letting people giving people more information, because you're going to capture a wider net. You're going to get more people who change from maybe on the fence to committed because they're able to see something that really matches. And it's all about kind of getting to that aha moment with people. What is the aha moment on your marketplace? For each of us, it's different, but often in a marketplace, it's like finding something that you really like, that you get really excited about, that feeling that you get of excitement. The sooner that we can get people there, the more excitement they'll have about our business and our brand, and the more likelihood they'll be to come back. And so usually providing more information and more visibility into what's out there really helps people. And it sort of gets over that little hump of, well, it's a lot of work. Like, what if they don't even have what I need? If you can kind of tell them up front, look, we do have what you need, that really helps. I don't think that's always the case, right, for small things, for small companies, but like generally, the playbook for marketplaces tends to be, let's work on one city and like really build out the supply and demand in one city so that every single person can get to that aha moment on both sides in that city. And you have that market thickness within a city or within a category, or, depending on what your marketplace is, it will look different. And so that would be my recommendation, is focus in a place where what you don't want to be is like, I don't want to open up because there's nothing there, right? Like no one will find anything and then I'm going to lose them anyway. You want to get to the point where you feel good about what kind of inventory you have on both sides, and then you can open it up and push that level of commitment to when you are already excited about the opportunity. And then I also think creating the like second level of commitment. So let's say it's like, hey, here's all these forms to fill out. I'm not ready, but like notify me in the future, or here's my email address, and just, someone can email me, or like whatever that. There's like the full commitment, but then there's, if you can provide that secondary level of commitment where I'm not quite ready for that, but maybe I'll do something, that will also help you just size whether it's working or not and how many people you're reaching. And you don't have as much of the ability to do that today. Like the more kind of ways that you can capture intent, the better signals you get for what to invest more in.
That's a great question. Thanks, Matt. I was actually going to ask about that on myself. So we're almost out of time here, but Daniel sent me a question. I think he had a poor internet connection. But he was asking about how have you guys, if you have, approached potentially promoting listings on other platforms?
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of experience with that. I don't. Upwork, it went into Google for jobs. Apartment List, there are certain aggregators that use it, but I just don't have a lot of experience there.
Got it. No worries. Cool. Hey, Andrew, one last question. He just jumped on.
And Tomas had one in the chat too, which is a hard question, but I'll take one more live question too.
Okay, cool. Hey, Andrew, do you want to jump on?
Well, let the other question go. I'm a late joiner here, so I don't know all of the previous questions. I run a company called Promoted. We do search for marketplaces and also the promotions in it.
Nice. That's awesome. So Tomas asked, given your focus on bringing in great people, can you tell us about the best hire? How did you bring them in and what made the fit strong? I've had a lot of good hires over the years, and I don't want to tell you the name of the person, so you'll try to take them. But I think generally I think there's kind of two big pieces. Maybe there's three. So there's like the top of the funnel and how you get your name out there and how you attract candidates. There's the actual process itself, making it a great experience for the candidate, but also figuring out the things that you need to make a decision and to compare them to other candidates. And then there's sort of like the selling and the closing. And so in terms of top of the funnel, I think this is a place I'm still working on at Apartment List, but I think like generally using social media platforms to share things, to share what we're doing, to share blog posts, like all sorts of things. And like everyone on the team gets to write something and we're able to share that with candidates. I think that is probably my best tip. And then also just, I personally go out and source on LinkedIn and I just message tons and tons of people and I, make a pitch to them and I talk to them personally. And so I spend a lot of my week in like those 30-minute just informational conversations. In terms of the interview process, I think the most important is the kind of a standard set of people involved, and you set out in advance. These are the competencies I'm looking for, and these are the cultural things that I'm looking for. And so, for example, like at Apartment List, no ego is something that's really important to us. That's a cultural thing that everyone needs to have. In terms of a role, on a product team, typically I look for product sense. Do you know what makes a product great? I look for communication and influence. I look for your ability to get things done, which includes kind of that data as well as the just the ability to break down a problem and execute. And so those are just competencies every PM role we look at. We assess them using the same questions for all of the PM roles, and we then calibrate. So I know I've asked the same question to 50 people. And so I kind of know what a good answer is and isn't when I say like, what metrics are you responsible for and how did you move them? And so I think that like being really clear in advance on what you're looking for, using your time really well with all of the people involved to make sure you're talking through all of the things that are important. You're comparing candidates against each other on those same criteria is really important. And then on the selling side, just building that personal connection, reaching out to them, one-on-one, texting them. We on Apartment List usually do something where we give like a gift as part of the offer. So based on something we know about them, something that they like. And so whether it be like you like yoga, we're giving you like a Lululemon gift card or something like that. And I think that just really helps. And so I think all of those pieces are important you have to have all of them in order to get to that great hire. And I think the fit needs to be with what the job requires in terms of competencies. It needs to be with the culture. And then I also think like that potential forward of you being able to grow with the company and kind of take on whatever new challenge comes ahead, I think is also really important. And that is mostly through like references, and we talk through their past experience. So we're like, what were you hired to do? What did you do? What was your biggest accomplishment? What was your biggest challenge? Who was your boss? What would they say about you? How would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 and why? Like those types of things. Typically, like the best people are the people whose bosses always try to keep them, always try to give them new projects. They've been able to grow within companies a bunch and sort of like learn something completely new that they had no experience doing, but their boss trusted them to do and their leadership trusted them to do. Those are kind of some of the things that I tend to look for.
That's really great. Thanks for getting to that question. I actually didn't see it. So Do you have time for one more? We can
Sure.
get Andrew. All right, thank you.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was curious about it. It sounded like you were talking a lot about from an operational and strategic standpoint in terms of how you build up marketplaces, how you think of that. What about from a technology standpoint? I mean, and part of this is where I'm coming from. My background is I ran marketplace at Pinterest, where it was like a pure attention marketplace. There was no physical good. And then taking that to marketplaces. And I was curious, is that something that is that in your playbook for how you build marketplaces using technology, or are you more, hey, it's the fundamentals of you need to have real sellers who have great quality control, making sure users can find what they're looking for, and having more of like a full service sort of approach?
I think you can be successful in different ways. I mean, even at Airbnb, Brian Chesky's famous for having his investor telling him do things that don't scale. And so I think at different stages it looks different. Ultimately, I get really excited about marketplaces where we can use technology to solve people problems. And so whether it be I'm in Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal, and I don't have access to clients in the US, or whether it be I'm a leasing agent and I just my phone is ringing off the hook and people are asking me whether I love dogs. And on the website, it says that I do. Those types of, if technology can step in and really solve a user need on both sides, that I think is just what I get excited about. I think there's ways to do things really manually, and that's sort of not as exciting for me personally. I think on the technology side, I think that's the key question is what are you, and there's a lot of good writings out there from Anderson Horowitz and others on marketplaces in terms of are you connecting people who are already connected, but you're just doing it better? Or are you creating new markets because there was no way to make this connection before? And for depending on what it is, I think depending on what you're doing, ideally you would actually create new markets. I think those are where the strongest businesses go. And so finding ways to do that within the customers that you're serving is something to focus on. And that typically does involve just using technology in differentiated ways from what you could just have people do manually if you had the people. I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful.
Oh, I like the point about going for new connections and the value of that. Versus just basically taking connections that already existed and doing it slightly better or transferring it to your properties. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, nice to meet you all. I was looking you up all on LinkedIn as you were asking questions. You do all sorts of really cool things. So I will see you in the community.
Yeah.
I would love to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. This is really awesome. And it was a fun one too. So we appreciate it.
For sure.